Look around! I got a lot of...
It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record!
Unity Takimalia!
Let's go! It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record!
Oh! You banna pihota, Mindia, huh? Ah, well... It's a new lap record!
lap record. It's a new lap record! 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 Lap record! It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record.
Fastest pod racer in the galaxy. Mahonic.
Oi, Panagon!